Good evening and welcome to Book Club and to Poetry Night. Thank you so much for joining us. This is my first time working here when we're being recorded. So just a little fast fact that we are going to introduce yourself. It will be something that lives on. Introduce yourself, introduce your book. And then going forward, just to let you know, do not put a paper down over the microphone. I think it's the first thing I probably did when they came in. So it was pointed out to please not do that, just so you know. I'm Elizabeth, this is Mickey, we're here tonight, and Katie is also in our audience in the back. And we just wanted to welcome you and thank you for sharing your art with us this evening. We will do 10-minute presentations. We have a little bit of time in between, and we will cue you to it, but I'm sure you're all very organized. We have seen you do this before. I know you're definitely professionals. I am going to introduce our first poet, who is here this evening. He does not have his book published yet, but there's plenty of information, and we will be sure to have it or be able to share that with you as it goes along. So Sam, if you'd like to come up front, and you can take the 2 minutes to introduce yourself. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Aureli, and I'll be reading from my forthcoming book titled On the Edge of Knowing. It's due out in spring of 2026. So I don't have books today, but I do have bookmarks that has some information on there, and you can follow along on the journey of my website, Substack, Twitter, and Instagram. On the Edge of Knowing came about during a major life event. For most of my life, I worked in a very intense work environment, and I never had time to breathe, never had time to sit still, working long hours, going to school at night, earning my architecture degree, leading worship at church, all while trying to raise a family, and I eventually hit a wall and came crumbling down. And out of those ashes, the book came into being. So I'm going to be reading hopefully 6 poems from On the Edge of Knowing, beginning with Between Stars and Silence. And I should put my glasses on. The earth turns, a blue pearl in the void, poised between fire and ice, spinning just so. A fraction off and breath would fade, tides might shrug the moon's pull, and we'd drift, cut loose in the dark. Yet oceans brush the shore, waves rising and falling, a blind hand tracing the curve of a familiar face. Was it whispered into being, a sigh from ancient depths, or flung here, a coin cast into a cosmic well? And me? I'm just a bit of motion, a pocket of warm blood, caught midway through the mystery, turning it over, a dull penny found on a street I don't remember walking. In the waiting, I kneel in the asparagus patch, shears in hand, cutting back the brittle ghosts of last year's growth. Each stem a memory, each snip a quiet prayer. The earth does not flinch. It takes the gesture without question. Nothing breaks the surface yet, but I ready the soil anyway, my hands learning the slow language of return. This too is how we live, clearing what no longer blooms, trusting the root that waits in silence to rise. This next poem is probably the first poem I wrote that was accepted in a literary journal. So it holds a special place in my heart. It's called Lost in the Woods, first published in the Atlanta Journal. The great American beech looms, its autumn leaves scattered below. Scaly cones of the eastern white pines lie spent among broken twigs. The crunch beneath my feet fills the quiet. No one travels here but the deer, the squirrel, the wood thrush singing. Fresh scrapes mark the fissured tulip bark, a black bear speaking in a tongue only the wild remembers. My claws are mute, my voice without melody. The wind carries the forest chatter, creaking branches, tumbling leaves. The aging white birch, skin unfolding, leans close and whispers, "Where are you going?" I've roamed poplars and spruces, brushed the stag's graze, heard the mourning dove coo, sought the great horned owl by night, yet these woods grow strange to me. In the distance, a brook's rush threads through roots and worn stone, its babble a steady hand, guiding me toward open waters, where the silt of the world drifts on. This next poem, can be difficult these days, especially to write poems about hope. But this is a poem about hope titled "Even Now, the Light." Listen. The earth still breathes beneath our hurried steps, its ancient pulse dwelling in the roots of trees, in the hush between waves. But we do not hear it. We walk with our heads bent, hands full of loss, as night folds itself over the fields, as the wind threads through the reeds. Even the moon turns away. But not all is lost. Look how the morning spills light into the empty spaces, how the hermit thrush lifts a note of gold against the fading dark. Spring comes anyway. And what is the sun if not the hand of mercy? What is the wind if not a voice calling us home? Even now, the earth begins again. Even now, there is light enough to find our way. I spent some time reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and the reason I decided to read it was because my uncle in Italy co-authored a book with a gentleman in Italy, an author, that somehow traces the Aureli lineage back to Marcus Aurelius. I don't know how accurate that is, nor do I have any land or titles to show for it. But this poem came about from a quote in the book Meditations. "Whatever this is that I am, it is flesh and a little spirit and a little and intelligence," by Marcus Aurelius. The poem is called "Call It Soul." I watch my hand in the half-light, a weathered map of old roads, dusty towns, and forgotten rivers. Scars like cryptic inscriptions, creases where shadows settle. It moves without asking, writes its own story, pulls the past from my pockets, cups water, cups air, cups silence. I am a collection of moving parts, bone and sinew, a murmuring machine, thought leaping between circuits like a bird too restless to land. Somewhere in this tangle of wires, something flickers, a small and stubborn flame. Not the hand, not the mind, but the thing neither can touch. Call it soul, call it ghost. It waits in the dim, watching the eye, watching it. And the poem I want to leave you with is titled On the Edge of Knowing, which is the title of the book. And this poem came about after reading the book When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. And there's a quote that I'd like to share with you. There is a moment, a cusp, when the sum of gathered experience is worn down by the details of living. We are never so wise as when we live in this moment. On the edge of knowing. Suddenly, I know what I want. To be scattered by the sea, where waves churn sand into bone, and wind stirs my ash with driftwood. I have no use for the frail certainties of man, or for those who sit with their stories clutched tight, as if time could still be held. What I want is this: to lose myself among the details, salt on my skin, the gull's cry that shatters the silence, the tide's slow pull, the way the sun bends low at dusk, its light thinning, then gone. For there is a moment when all I have gathered crumbles like sand, and I, for once, am wise enough to let it be. Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing it. Now we'll take a minute to introduce Ariel.
Yeah, should I just come up and?
You come right up, you do the introductions, and then I'm going to step away and let you each introduce. I don't think I was clear about that. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. My name's Ariel Friedman. I am primarily a musician, or I was for most of my life, still am, but now I'm also a poet. Always was drawn to writing poetry as a kid, and then stopped for a long time. And then I had children, and then who knew, but that's this very generative, creative time. So all of the poems in this chapbook that came out about a year and a half ago are mostly about motherhood and also my childhood and sort of, putting all those generational pieces together. And since I'm also a musician, a couple of these poems that I'll read tonight are also songs. I started it as, I would write them as poems and then I turn them into songs. And I have a duo with my sister, and this album is all about motherhood, and it's coming out in the spring along with Sam's book. So some of these that you'll hear are also songs, but I will not be singing them tonight. All right, so I'm going to start with a poem I wrote that was originally published in Panegyrus, and this is called In Charge of Birds. We follow the robin as long as we can, tracing the curlicue of her path. She hops behind bushes, and we crouch to find her. She floats to a low branch, and we marvel at the effortless levitation, the slightest stirring of feathers. I watch her as my son does, as though this were also the first robin of my third spring on earth. When she finally disappears, my son pleads, more bird, looks at me as though I could rise above the white pine, comb its needles with my wings. As a child, I mistook dreams for reality, was sure I could fly. That once I'd soared so low over the stairs, I'd grazed its tufted carpet with my fingertips as though it were hillside grass. I tell my son I am not in charge of birds, that they are bound only by a contract with worms and the open beaks of their babies, the flow of tropospheric currents, and whatever genetic programming turns their bodies south each winter, as though they were compasses that cannot be held in our palms. We walk to the park, and I promise him we will see more birds. We will pull them from the sky with the force of our desire. We'll fly low over the hillside. And now another child-based poem about the mundanity of motherhood and the transcendence of the things your children point out to you. This is called Look Up. Look up, you remind yourself daily. Look up from the screen-cracked phone, from the oatmeal dropped on the floor, the sponge still wet in your hand. Look up from the steps that could lead anywhere, the grocery bags that heavy your shoulders like milk-full breasts. Look up from the walk that needs shoveling, the cat that needs feeding. Look up tremulous after reading it in a book, after the snow has photo-negatived each tree, branch bone underbelly, white shadow above. Look up from the pile of snow you've made into a cat. Watch as your son carries a dusting in his mittens, pats it onto the earless head. See him find a yellowed leaf, help him separate the midrib from the blade, see the blade become a whisker. How he struggles to poke it into the cheek, gives up, hollers up, and runs to the bottom of the hill where he waits for you. Look up later when the sun sinks, when the sun orange pinks the sky, when you begin your walk home from the playground, when your son says, "Mommy, moon," and you marvel together at the waning gibbous that gathers the sky around her like cloth. Then, "Where babies?" he asks. And you know he means stars, which are anything but babies, though you don't tell him so. You tell him it's not dark enough yet, that certain things can only be seen in the dark. The moon's many children, for instance. Tiny and somewhere an entire world. Oh yeah, the moon was amazing last night. Yeah, the harvest moon, right?
Yes.
Speaking of moons, I just realized there's moons appear in this poem as well. Connection. This is a poem I wrote in the style of that old childhood rhyme, The House That Jack Built. And this is about my maternal grandparents who had their house built for them in the 1950s. And my mom was born there, her three older brothers, and then I ended up going to college near those grandparents and spending a lot of time with them. So this is sort of like a generational story, starting with how my mother was conceived, which is an interesting story. Highland Park, Illinois, 1952 to 2020. This is the house my grandparents built, split level brick with a brook out back. This is my grandmother, aproned and aching for a fourth child, who shapes dough into moons. And these are her sons who eat the moons that my grandmother made in the house my grandparents built. This is the note she leaves on the table, and this is my grandfather arriving home. This is the kitchen, unusually dark, and this is the switch that turns on the light, illuminating the note, which is perfectly cursived, "I'm sorry we don't see eye to eye." These are the hands that grip the table that matches the chair in which he sits in the house my grandparents built. These are the headlights that split the night. This is the relief that fills the split. This is the bed where later they lie, and this is the shawl that covers the belly that grows my mother in the house my grandparents built. This is my mother, whose hands play piano, and these are the cuts that scrape her hands. These are the brothers who lemon the cuts, who hide in her closet, jump out in the dark, that once cloaked the note that my grandmother wrote in the house my grandparents built. This is the man my mother will marry, and here are the daughters and music they make. These are the daughters who grow up singing, who write songs out in ink that they turn into sound as they travel around, and here are the stanzas left unsung as their grandparents are buried one by one. These are the people attending their shows, and this is the virus that keeps them at home, here, where their children say, "Sing, Mama," anyway, who delight in the rhymes they hear in the songs that they sing while they bake, turning dough into shapes that melt in the mouths, that call out in the dark, that quiets the lark, whose song writes the day, that lifts the airplane, that arcs the blue as it carries us, me, my mother, my son, back to the house my grandparents built. Thank you. I'm just going to read a couple more. Actually, just two more. I have one new poem that ostensibly is about to come out in a new literary journal online, hopefully this month. It's new, but I started it about 3 years ago. My son's almost 7, and this is about his 4th birthday. So, will I live forever? You ask me at bedtime on your 4th birthday. And when I say no, no one lives forever. And you say, but numbers go forever. My mind traces the imagined course of your life. 8-year-old turned teenager, gangly kid in a dorm turned 20-something in a queen bed, cuddled with the shadowy figure of not me, until you are old, older than me, and suddenly I am not in the picture. A pencil drawing of us, me erased, and it takes some time to soar back into my body, next to you, on your bed, on the floor in my bedroom, a place I can't imagine you'll ever leave. I tell you yes. Numbers go forever. Squint, and you'll see them curl over the horizon, carrying the future in their tiny mathematical hands. Someday, I tell you, we'll look down at them, or maybe up, our essences scattered like light through a prism into anything but numbers. I'm going to leave you with a poem I wrote after seeing Hades Town, the musical. If anyone's seen it, it's so good. And the whole time you're sitting there in the theater and you just want it to have a happier ending, then you know it's going to have, like a lot of the old stories. So this is called Happy Ending. And here it is. Happy Ending. Catch the story midstream and hear the pounding doubt between his temples. See the pivot, simple, on the balls of his feet. Eurydice's gasp of realization, not unlike Lot's wife, who, upon turning, glimpses her flaming city one last time before she goes rigid. But these are endings, not beginnings. And the difference between stories and real life is that real life keeps going. I scroll the headlines, 1.5 degrees and climbing, horizons like the walls of Hades. When you ask for a story, I know you mean one about cartoon trains, the chase and rescue, the close call. But in these stories, you'll find that nothing saves Sodom, that Eurydice is swallowed whole by the earth. I tidy the kitchen, read another email urging a call to my representatives. This isn't the world I wanted to give you. Once you said women could not be rabbis, and I wondered at that trope 3,000 years old and lodged already in your small bones. What other stories do you know that I haven't told you? Do you know how long Orpheus walks to emerge from the underworld? How lonely he must feel and helpless how close he comes to the daylight? Do you know that our seas will rise? That the more stunning the sunset, the more toxins in the atmosphere? That when snow falls, I ache to swallow the landscape? Maybe you know already that Orpheus finds his bride, fights to hold on, step after step through the earth's intestines, ahead, the growing circle of light. Maybe you know already how it ends, though when I tell you, I'll describe a finger of fresh air that finds its way to his cheek, the quickening of his pace as he approaches the threshold. This time, he won't look back. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Merryn Rutledge, and I'm going to read from my first book, Sweet Juice and Ruby Bitter Seed, and a few poems from the book that will come out next spring, both from Kelsey Books, which I'm very grateful to. The first poem is Serendipity, and in this poem I try to solve a problem in a very unsystematic way. So, if you are a methodical person, this poem may drive you nuts. You may even want to cover your ears. Serendipity. After unsuccessfully Googling my problem, the milky film on my dishwasher walls, I was leafing through the Kenmore manual and poking my head in my appliance to eyeball what was on the parts list when the word filters caught my eye. You're supposed to clean the filters? Who knew? I just moved in and reading directions isn't my thing. Back inside the machine, under the bottom rack where I didn't think anybody but Kenmore Repair would ever stick their head, I sought to plumb the mystery of where the filters hid. I found the handle of a paring knife, rusty and unmanned by the loss of its blade, a crusty dime that raised questions about what the previous homeowners ate, and sea glass, sanded smooth by spinning washer blades and lodged between two dirty filter screens. After scrubbing each one with an old toothbrush I found under the sink, I climbed back on the web where I located a product called Finish that promised to remove a mineral film. I felt hopeful, like when you're nearing the end of a long board game and you look up to find the rain that kept you indoors has stopped, so you can go for a walk around the lake where mysteries are not for solving, like how a whirl makes drying leaves pirouette on toe point, and how, just before it slips away, the slanting sun flares to burnish a stand of yellowing beach to gold. Also from the book, this is a prose poem, so maybe some of you can see that it's arranged as paragraphs. And I was inspired by reading an essay by Joy Harjo, that wonderful poet, who said in the essay, "I'm convinced that most waywardness is creativity turned backwards." She's speaking of the imprisoned men to whom she taught creative writing. Bad boys. Cousin Daryl told whoppers his dad called lies. Snapping turtle big as a tire wheel. Big old water moccasin thick as my daddy's arm. The sting at the end of his father's arm didn't change much about his voluble son. As a grown man, the fish Daryl catches are invariably huge. And Montana, where he got rich selling houses, is the best place to live in the whole US of A. My brother Kyle started kicking holes in doors when he was 3. In school, he didn't sit still, raise his hand, or read. Kyle told me one time, after a teacher conference, Mon broke down crying in the parking lot. He watched her shoulders heave, but felt he couldn't do anything for her because he really had failed everything but recess. After trying one thing and another, our parents sent him to wildlife camp, where he learned scads of bird species from just hearing their calls. Dr. Kyle still has trouble reading, but he likes listening to his patients and birdsong. Now turning to my book that will come out in the spring, the title is To Carve a Path Through Thickets. And it comes from the poem that opens the book, which is dedicated to my father, whose name was Lloyd Lafayette. But Southerner that he was soon nicknamed Fate. Setting out. He left home with a cast iron skillet, matches, a little flour, lard, and Void, Vidal, Curtis, Caldwell, who would follow him anywhere. Joining them were 3 classmates ripe for adventure. Fate had been reading Thoreau, whose experiment he aimed to adapt to wilder conditions in the Ozarks. Used to woods and solitary work, Fate imagined he had already tasted a little of the marrow of life the Walden man was after. Miss Troy, the teacher who brought him the Concord sages, also confirmed that you had to reflect on your experiences in order to effect a deepening. Then there was no telling what would unfold. The boys hiked as the long spring day unspooled. By the time they decided they were far enough from the one-street hamlet of their civilization, they were famished. Gnarly blackberry patches nearby, and the bears had left some. The boys built a fire and baked a gooey cobbler, juice turning to candy from a little scorching. As dusk swooped in, Fate invited the others to think about what becoming a leader would entail. Void guffawed, chiding his friend for staying so serious. Fate grinned and eased up in favor of owl entertainment. Lying down beside the others, it came to him that this was what he wanted to do: guide boys and girls on adventures, like how to feed a firelit soul and carve a path through thickets that lay between them and being grown. In the meantime, he determined to stay awake with the creatures stirring around him, watching for ways to venture into the dark. In the next one, another one of my faults, besides unsystematic thinking, is loss of perspective. This is called perspective, where I seek to get it back. Fed up with fretting over taxes and email that stings and the slow drip of words that pool in my mind, I take a walk to find what is bigger. Lining my street, svelte, young sycamores sashay like models down a runway. Older trees, fat, knuckled, speckle-barked, willingly upstaged. Their own limbs seem to whistle, though, like piercing piccolos. Warblers serenade the village of tall townhouses that hum with stories of neighbors' lives. Carol's, too, and Paul's, and Susan's, who, when they died, left themselves here among us other elders with careers, grandkids, travel. Joys, struggles, sorrows, some greater than mine. In the far field, with the marsh beyond, looms the blunt-nosed boulder, Moby Dick, big as a barge and how deep under? The sky, brushed with cirrus clouds, whispering possibility. Rain coming, my next-door neighbor confirms as I walk back up my driveway. Millions of raindrops will shower the estuary's long neck as it winds toward the illimitable sea. Finally, somewhat in the spirit of the intergenerational poems that you were reading, Ariel, and not motherhood in this case, but grandmotherhood. This is called Gift. A friend's gait is wobbly. Another one has worn out knees. Mine creaky as I trot beside my grandson Marcel. Why are your teeth black? He wants to know. Tea stains I can hardly see. Still, I know myself better now, how to let go of small slights, how to catch the thief inside who tries to snatch my self-esteem, how to touch serenity by naming daily blessings as I tap each bead on the large bangle Marcel created as a toddler, generously threading bright plastic on a pipe cleaner. He evidently thought the stiff hoop would fit my grown-up wrist, thin, eroding tracery. Or maybe he saw but imagined me anyway, sturdy and always. When I was raising his mother, all the unlovely imperfect I threw away. Macaroni necklaces, crooked origami, a coat hanger bearded with yarn. Now, love's ambitious project, I save. This is it. And I now actually use it as my prayer beads every night. Thank you for listening.
I don't know if ready is the word, but
I know.
I'm here. Hello, I'm Matthew E. Henry. I'm in the weird position because I have a book that came out a year and some change ago. It was my 6th collection, and I decided earlier this summer I'm done reading from that. Just some life changes, and it's like I'm kind of done reading from that book. I have another book that's coming out next spring as well, some others, and it's like I could read from that. No, so I'm going to read some poems that are some I've never read in front of anyone before. So those who have read in front of people know how terrifying that is, and a few others that are in collections in progress. I'm working on. I have 4 different manuscripts out in the world being rejected right now because that's ADHD. That's how I roll. And I feel like I should apologize in advance for those who have heard me read before. You already know. I sometimes bring the room down because I write largely from places of trauma, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. I'm Black. Hello. This is not a. I'm God tanned. This isn't like something different. And I'm also an educator. I've taught for 24 years now. And I also write in terms of theology and the intersection of those things. And so a lot of that will come up in various ways. This is a new poem entitled, When Asked If, as a Veteran Teacher, I've Gotten Used to It. It says something that I no longer react to a story of a masked gunman shooting up a school, or shooting up a church, or shooting up a school that is a church, or a church within a school, or a pew's worth of children who were shot in a church school, or that a brace of children died after being shot in a school church, or how a gunman could take the coward shot in a church parking lot after marking mass in the first week of school. It says something that I only wanted answers, needed to investigate. A hero story of a boy
throwing himself onto a friend to shield him from bullets exploding the stained glass of a church, protecting him from the automatic fire piercing school windows with stigmata? Was he shot in the back because he truly greater loved a friend, laid down his life to cover him? Was he duck, duck, goose diving to safety and landed into a space occupied by a lap? Or was he simply, sadly, slugged in the back, collapsing into a better story? You'd get over it. The title is a quote from one of my former high school students, for Anna. Think of what we know, what science has told us of missing limbs and phantom pain. Fists still clenched decades after the shearing horror. Shrapnel buried in aged meat, inoperable without risking an artery's vital nicking, twisted with the slightest change in temperature. How rough hands clasped over mouths, fingers taut around throats, forearms, thighs, linger. The summer dilemma of hiding unfaded scars along wrists. Given all we know of how wounds are frost-heaved by cold memory, why would you ever think that I'd get over a little sister-sized hole in the center of my chest? One of my former students, we were having a conversation 2 or 3 years ago, and she was like, well, if I killed myself, like, my family would be sad about it, but you'd get over it eventually. And I just didn't have the words in the moment to, and it's inappropriate to just like strangle a child. Like, that's not okay. So I wrote to this poem as a way of processing it, and also gave it to her as a graduation present. And then she came back. I was like, why would you do this? She's in college right now. She's doing well. And I got a text message last week or so being like, I finally got into therapy and it's really good. And I'm like, let's go. I was going to say at the beginning, some of these are school poems, obviously. This is another poem the title is a quote. I was not going to read this, then I decided I was going to read it. I think a couple of people heard the original version of this over the summer, and this was literally, you heard a written by hand version of it. This is the more updated version of it. Cover your ears, it's going to be loud at the front end. Oh God, please stop! From the back of the class, his cry careens over the heads of the rest. Their stricken faces, jaws slack or furiously clenched, eyes dewy or attempting to shut out the assailant in my words. But I refuse. Continue explaining the lynching by car of James Byrd Jr., briefly mentioned in Rankin's The White Card, open on their desks. The event is presented as a turning point. Character development for Charles, a billionaire with Basquiat's defacement on his wall. A news story whose horror shook him into seeing that racism still existed in the enlightened, heady days of 1998. A details-oriented educator, I clarify why Charles was so troubled. Byrd, 49, disabled, black, was walking home when 3 white men, one he thought a friend, had known his whole life, offered him a ride in a gray Ford pickup. Crushed between them, they forced him to remote woods, kicked and punched and baseball batted him in and out of consciousness, spray painted his face blacker, pissed and shat on him, retrieved a 24-foot-long chain from the truck bed, noosed it about his ankles, and dragged him for 1.5 miles. The FBI's autopsy determined he was conscious, trying to keep his upper body off of the road-rashing concrete, until their carefree swerving swung him into a culvert, which severed his right arm and head. Undaunted, they continued to drag his remainder for another 1.5 miles to the cemetery of a black church, where they mutilated and distributed his corpse to be found in time for the following morning's Sunday service. I tell my class this did not happen in a grainy black and white photo of the past. 81 pieces of Byrd were jigsaw scattered through Jasper, Texas on June 7th in 1998, 2 weeks before I graduated from high school, that I am only 2 years older than they are now. I remind my stunned, sobbing, silent students that I am younger than their parents, who may send me emails asking why I would subject their children to these horrors from another time, who may, echoing Charles, echoing their children, echoing James Byrd Jr., ask me to please stop. But the truck didn't, so I can't. I'll read one political poem, and then I'll read, I've been told I need to end things on like a happier note. I work on it. The first time. Also, I should say, I think this poem is a happier poem, but again, like, for those who have read my first full-length collection, the Colored Page, that was my first time like reading in front of people, and I had folks like come up to me, oh, hearing you read that poem was so different. Like, it was humorous. I was like, I thought it was funny, but like, oh no, I thought it was just like black rage. I was like, oh, I guess 6 of this, half dozen of the other. The first time. The first time they told me to pray for him, pray for his success. That doing otherwise was like rooting against the pilot while sitting on the plane. If he crashes, we all go down. And such destructive thinking is the purview of progressives with the privilege of race and or wealth and or gender and or the ability to be unaffected by the minor inconvenience of someone else's cataclysm, like being forced to check a bag as your seatmate is tasered and dragged spasming unconscious down the aisle. They would then strain the metaphor, cite access to flawless flotation devices, parachutes, escape pods. This time I tell them, fuck it. Let the plane crash. Burn with all of us on it. Let the unfortunate survivors always remember what shook the plane, allowed smoke into the cabin, lit the drink carts on fire, blew bolts off the door, engulfed the fuselage in flames while trapped in a bathroom cell unable to reach a useless mass as the freefall began. Some might call this selfish. Affix the prior label of privilege upon my dark lapel. They forget our history. The many thousands gone under the sky, under the sea. Forgot how long we've been caught in the middle passage between every face of white rage since they dragged us here in chains. So let them try their hands at some race play, being treated like a nigger for 4 or 8 years. And then we'll see how quickly a change is going to come. This is just to say. I'm assuming all the poets in the room at some point read This Is Just to Say and then wrote their own version of it. This summer, I don't know. I was at the Eliot House in Gloucester doing a residency, and these 2 poems just sort of came out of somewhere. I'll blame the ghost of T.S. Eliot, even though he didn't write the original poem. This is just to say, I've eaten the latest passive-aggressive note you left in the office fridge. Your sarcastic missive about labeling, dating, and discarding food in a timely fashion because we are not, in fact, animals raised in a barn by mothers who don't work here. Yes, I meant eaten. I panicked, and it was the fastest way to protect you. I fear I was too late. No need to write another note in your black, all caps, Sharpie script. They got the message. I leave this on your desk to warn. Someone may have placed rabbit feces in your raisin and chocolate trail mix. Toenail clippings in your shredded coconut flakes. Given your fondness for steak salads, be suspicious of the communal ranch dressing. Forgive them for being so petty and so cold. Don't ask, I don't know. And this last poem, I'll read the title twice. I don't know. An open letter to the guy in the next stall. Yeah. An open letter to the guy in the next stall. I get to do this with a straight face. It's a serious poem. Okay, wait. An open letter to the guy in the next stall. What are we doing? Plop, plop, fizz, fizz isn't only commercial relief from the 1970s. We are men, human, and this is common fare. Nothing coming out of us is a great mystery or an unimaginable feat, save perhaps in terms of quantity or consistency. What were we expecting? Potpourri scented with jasmine and lavender instead of the hot gas of deconstructed beef stew? Whole kernels of corn and peas, fibrous flecks of onion still in evidence? We didn't come here for romance. Can acknowledge the sound of wet socks repeatedly slapped against a rocky shore, ripples scattering gulls and brown trout. Why should either of us be embarrassed? Whether witness or culprit to the natural excretions that brought us here, or exchange silent apologies, eyes never meeting in the mirror should we simultaneously exit to wash hands that we won't shake. Even with the stench of lawmakers guarding bathroom access, can't we agree, regardless of skin color, or hat color, or stool, straining To uphold an unhealthy social norm is un-American, when unbridled release is what God intended. In the name of self-love and decency, let us not give ourselves over to the prudish machinations of the repressed. Let us lean forward and hug our knees in midden consent. List sideways, lifting a cheek as needed, so unabashedly fire fecal cannons for effect. Let us unite and usher in an era of fully empty happiness, and make manifest the promise of the old passing away for the boundless new to come. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I have to follow that. Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Jane. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I hail from New Bedford, where I am serving as the current Poet Laureate. A title I hold with great pride. Thank you very much. I brought a selection of books tonight that are by my poetry group. So I belong to Anomaly Poetry. We publish 2 anthologies every year. We are currently open for submissions for our winter book, which is called Tidings, that is going to be published in December of this year. So if you're looking to share some work with some local poets, actually we are international. I shouldn't call us local poets. We are an international publication at this point in time. And so if you'd like to get in on the fun, please see me afterwards. I'll give you my email and share some work. All right, enough about me. I'm going to read you some pieces. Actually, as you were all announcing, I am going to be self-publishing a book in February. So yeah, look forward to that. I think some of these are going to end up in it, but it's still kind of, I'm still killing all of my darlings or viciously protecting some of them. So this is a new one that I wrote a few months ago. It is called The Garden. The first time he asked for the cup to pass from him, I wonder if he saw into the unaltered future, a world still wild, lush, and green, and perhaps he saw us, feral children, still singing ancestral songs and dancing around fires, heathens and pagans who knew no other path and had never heard his name. The second time he pleaded, weeping, knowing the unmovable iron will of his father, I imagined he saw us as we are now, after centuries of death and destruction, blasphemous and prideful, worshiping the framed portraits of a blue-eyed, golden-haired idol who has been given his name. The third and final time, begging, repeating his mournful prayer, I imagine he saw himself alive, whole and unscarred, his home and an olive grove shining in the sun. I believe he saw his family, a wife and children, heard them calling for their Baba, loving and good. And I imagine he saw his mother, gray and wrinkled, cradling her grandchildren, blessing them, kissing their tiny feet, and softly, gratefully repeating their names. Okay, keep the religious trauma going for a little bit. This one is a poem that I continuously edit and add to and detract from and add to, and so a version of it will end up in my book, but I don't know what it's going to look like. So this is the current iteration that I am happy with. So here we go. This is ecclesiastical, and it is with assistance from Roger Robinson, who published a poem of a similar kind of vibe, and so I borrow some of his language. If I should speak of prayer, I am thinking of the night the world learned of Notre Dame burning, as we paused for hours watching ancient wood and stone turn black and crack in the heat. A man rushed into the blaze to save the crown of thorns, which may or may not have pierced the Savior's skin. What risk and what passion to save something beautiful, what trust in the divine, fervent words of praise and glory. What do I believe? If I should speak of communion, then I am speaking of the bakers who begin their work before I've even opened my eyes in the morning, to create beauty and nourishment, goodness that helps the poor wretch through the next task, the next challenge, the next, well, what can't be absolved with a little sweetness. Take this, a moment to savor, to rest, and to watch the world turn to color before you. And if I should speak of the good word, I am thinking of my poet friend Miklos, murdered by Nazis in November of 1944 and buried in a mass grave, nameless and abandoned. His wife brought his body home after the war to be buried under a more familiar moon. They found a small notebook containing his last 5 poems, still safely nestled in the pocket of his moldering coat, holy witness, scripture, written by a man at the edge of doom, poems of love, of longing, of terror, that were preserved through some higher power to be printed in books that sit on my shelf here on the cliff's edge in 2025, poems that echo and reverberate like a gunshot. And again, if I should speak of prayer, I am thinking of my grandfather singing hymns during church services at his care home. As memory slips away, what came to the surface was joy and beauty and exultation. I see a blue jay nearly every time I think of him, not necessarily singing, but certainly rejoicing in his blueness, in his flight, in his freedom. What do I believe? Okay. God, sorry. Two more. Matthew, I think you and I need to be better friends, because I think we've got a few poems here that we need to edit for each other. This one is titled An Aspirational Self-Portrait as a Man in a Plaid Suit at My Uncle's Funeral. I've forgotten the names of most of the children, though they wear my cousins' faces. My cousins now wear my aunts' and uncles' faces. Whose face do I own now? I thought my suit mousy, neutral in its browns and reds, but here, among the somber Catholic mourners, I am a preening bird. I kept our grandfather's hair cut close at the sides, but coiffed and set in a wave at the crown. My overcoat is black and stern-looking, and that counts for something. I maintain my composure until the lovely strings of Danny Boy pour from a teenage cousin's violin. She wears her mother's face so well, I swear we're back there at the beginning, before any of us knew heartbreak, before there was any parting among us. She has the same constellation of freckles across the bridge of her nose, and I guess I've kept mine too. I do not take communion. Instead, I make my way to the back of the church to await my uncle's casket. Okay. One more religious-themed poem, and then one just about death. So I'll leave you on a high note. How's that? This one was published actually. Oh, this is a good segue. Published in a collection by the Pour Me a Poem anthology, published by some intrepid poets out in Mansfield who host an open mic called Pour Me a Poem every second Thursday of the month, which is coming up this Thursday. Yep. We're all going to be.
We both read. And you.
Oh, yes, and I've been there. And actually, I'm going to be featuring in November, so I'll be there in November. But it's coming up this Thursday the 9th, so if you want to head over to Wayne Daniel Berard's lovely home in Mansfield, that's happening this Thursday. Actually, you can catch that one, or you can come down my way to New Bedford, where I'll be hosting my own on Thursday night at the Co-Creative Center. But shout out to the folks in Mansfield who started that community project that has really blossomed into something beautiful. So if you do have a chance to get out there, I highly recommend it. This is my poem, Roscommon, 1885. A freckled woman sits beside her fire in the central heartbeat within her steadfast walls. She tends to the flame by day, cooking and sewing and caring for small hands and hungry mouths. She banks the embers at night to steal a few hours of precious sleep. She keeps them alive through famine and unrest and outright war until they are grown and can drift across the sea, leaving her walls in the sweetest of shambles. She lights candles in her window, says her lengthy prayers to St. Bridget, that they'll find their way home eventually. Her children thrive and build homes and families of their own. They do not return. Some lie in the pallid earth of distant lands. Some visit, but will not call it home. They keep her traditions, the candles, the language, the food, but forget to pass them on. Raise their children across the sea with promises of more than their first home could keep. Another freckled woman sits beside her fire, a grateful wretch trying to reconnect. She lights the kindling, watches the brilliant dance of amber, gold, and indigo. She lights candles, recites exuberant prayers to the goddess Bridget. She doesn't understand why the scent of dark earth or mist rising from the snow makes her cry. A gentle reminder of those echoes, assurances of the skittishness of fate. And one more for you. This one was written after an exhibit of Victorian spirit photography. If you're not familiar, that was when folks would kind of do the smoke and mirrors to make loved ones appear in black and white photography, and the Victorians just went nuts for it, and there's a ton of it, but there was a beautiful exhibit at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem last year, and I got a little obsessed with it, and so there's a couple of poems that came out of that experience, but this is my favorite, and it's called Any Daub, and it begins with a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes. Untaught eyes will see a portrait of parent, spouse, or child in almost any daub. I hear it inflected with a sneer, an easy scam, a leaky faucet of riches, emptying the pockets of the mourning and the lost, who sit down in a puff of smoke and mirrors, hoping for revelation, for something concrete, assurances of everlasting love or life or something in between. Unmet desires, unfulfilled dreams, and all that love not given clouds the vision, distorts the mind's eye, and there it is, a tender face, a fondly remembered hand, the whisper, the hazy thought that they stand just behind you, just over your shoulder. I used to sneer as well, seeing gullible and naive fools, but oh, how love teaches us, how loss and grief make it all so clear. I would pay anyone and give anything to see the evidence that you move just beyond my sight, or just out of earshot, to find your face in a cloud of the unknown, see your endearments scrawled in dust on the lens, for any fuzzy suggestion that you continue to love me when all else is gone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming. That is just a stirring of emotions. I'm not even really sure how to end this all, but to say thank you so much for sharing all your words and your poetry, and it means so much for us here at Book Club to be able to share it with you. Of course, the books are available here tonight. A signed book is always a lovely gift. That's just part of our welcoming you to our community, and we look forward to hearing many more wonderful readings. Thank you so much.